We'll begin by reading the biographies of we have two presenters today, some powerhouses in the field of total coliform. The first is Jessica Miller. She is a work leader with the Drinking Water Assessment Team in the Drinking Water Standards section. She has a bachelor's in biology from the University of Texas at El Paso and an MBA in healthcare administration from Our Lady of the Lake University. Jessica joined 2 years ago after 16 years of lab experience in El Paso, and she conducts public water system compliance under the revised total coliform rule. The second presenter is Justice Hefner. He's a natural resource specialist with the Drinking Water Assessment Team, same team, in the same section, the Drinking Water Standards section. He has a bachelor's in animal science from New Mexico State University. Justice has been with TCQ for 2 years as well, where he conducts public water system compliance under the same revised total coliform rule. Like I said, these are two powerhouse people, so please ask your questions afterwards. And before we get started, we actually do have a word from Andy Waite before we start the presentations, so he'll have a little announcement.
Hi, you guys all know me, I hope. Andy. We were doing that total coliform testing procedure downstairs. We had 97 people stick their fingers in a sample bottle, total coliform sample bottle, switch their fingers around, and then we went ahead and we put them in the incubator yesterday afternoon. We did have one fella actually lick the cap, and I'm really glad that one didn't come back positive, so we don't have any worries there. And you can see we did 97 samples. We had 2 positives. One was the control for total coliform, and the other one was the control for the fecal coliform. The blank was in fact blank, and all 97 of the other ones did not show any total coliforms. And the reason I'm saying this is not to say, oh, you guys can be lackadaisical about sampling, right? Your samplers can do anything they want. What I'm trying to say is that if in fact you come up with a positive, it's in the pipes. It's not the sampler's issue. They didn't do something wrong. Don't try to explain it away with that. Just go right after the fact that there's an issue. It might be transient. You may never see it again. You may have dealt with it because you increased your disinfectant. You may have taken care of it because you flushed. You may never see it again, but it was there. So that's all I'm trying to say is believe the results. They've gotten a whole lot more better. It's not a 5% false positive. It's much closer to a 1% or even less. You can see right now that the odds are 1 in 97, right? So we'll keep doing this. We'll be here next year. We'll do it again, see what happens. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. I just want to thank you for all your insight. Let's talk about coliform sampling and assessment actions. Today we'll talk about coliform sampling, positive sample results, repeat samples, assessment process, assessment documentation, TCQ assessment review process, and some further resources. So the goal of the revised total coliform rule is to protect public health by reducing potential pathways for microbial and fecal contamination into public water systems. That is by the use of total coliforms and Escherichia coli, or EC, as indicator bacteria to determine the adequacy of water treatment and the integrity of your distribution system. Coliform sampling. So these are some best sampling practices. So you want to prepare your sample, your standard operating procedure, your SOP, and your sample siting plan. You also want to organize a sampling kit. In that little white box is your sampling kit. Different things you should include: your gloves, your sample bottles, a clean cooler. You should also train your sample collection and train microbial reporting form how to fill that out properly, as that is ever-changing and something we should continue to get better at. So for your sample collection SOP, they should include the following things: your sample site selection, your inclement weather protocols, preparing sample tap, disinfecting and flushing, core and residual testing, and acceptable levels. Again, talk about completing your MRF and sample transportation, such as using a clean cooler and not the one that your kids put their feet in all the time. On our website, there's an example SOP. If you guys don't have one, you can adapt that and change it for your water system. Now your sample siting plan. Should keep that updated. Doesn't need to be approved by the RTCR program, but your region, when they come out and do a CCI, will look at that, so please keep it updated as homes become vacant or you expand your system. You should avoid entry points, dead-end mains, storage tanks, unoccupied sites. You want to avoid these sites because it should be representative of your system as a whole. So those entry points and storage tanks may have a higher residual concentration due to the water being closest to your distribution facility, while dead-end mains and unoccupied houses may have a lower residual concentration due to being farther away or having stagnant water age. For your groundwater systems, when they use groundwater wells and they're notified of a routine total coliform positive, a raw well sample must be collected at each active well within 24 hours. And these are referred to as trigger source monitoring samples. So be sure to list those groundwater wells on your SSP as well, so you can easily refer back to those. So if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to the groundwater rule team at the email on the screen. So some best practices for lab choices. You should pick an accredited lab, pick a primary lab and a backup lab, know their hours and fees, and build rapport with them, as you will see them monthly. On the RTCR webpage and the PWSSP website, we have our lab map, kind of Google map. You can search it and find labs in your vicinity. And if it's ever a Friday or a weekend and you're trying to find one because your primary lab is closed, this is a good resource to get your repeats in on time. So let's talk about how to complete the MRF. So you need to complete the following information: your PWS information, your sampler information, your sample details, and your drop-off details. So the MRF is used to transcribe your data into the electronic delivery or the electronic submission that gets reported to TCEQ from the lab. So therefore, it's important to use legible handwriting so your lab is not trying to decipher what you wrote in the field. Always keep your contact information updated as well, as when I'm trying to notify you or the lab's trying to notify you guys of a positive to take your repeats. It can sometimes be hard if your voicemail is full or not set up. Always verify your information on your MRF to prevent missed information or incorrect information. For those who pre-fill MRFs, make sure you grab the correct MRF if you sample for multiple systems. And also make sure your sample locations match your SSP location so we can easily verify your up and down streams in the case of like an E. coli sample. So verify that MRF information. Now you have your MRF filled out. What should you do? Verify. And your lab should also verify it as well upon dropping it off. Always double check. Give limited number of corrections that can be allowed by the QAPP, and some of those that are after sample incubation require TCQ approval. And never falsify information. So some common MRF errors are incorrect sample type, your incorrect PWS or incomplete PWS information, sampler information, collection date or time, chlorine residual or chlorine type, and your originating sample information. So again, yeah, if they're pre-incubation and your lab catches it, if you're still on site, you can correct it, and if not, they can email it to you. You guys can correct it prior to incubation, but post-incubation, you or the lab will need to reach out to TCEQ and get approval. So positive sample results. The lab's responsibility is to notify the PWS by phone based on that MRF contact information that's listed at the top, and also they'll notify TCEQ by email so we can enter it and reach out to you guys with repeat requirements. The PWS's responsibility is to ensure that the contact information is correct. Again, so your voicemail is not full or you guys are out of town and unable to collect those repeats in time. And actively check your voicemail and take your action ASAP within 24 hours of notification. So some microbial positive basics. Bacteria are present in a water sample. It could potentially be contamination. So types of bacteria tested are Coliforms and E. coli's. And taking those repeat samples is to investigate, to find out what might have caused this. Was it a broken chlorinator or a broken line or just merely the wind blew that day and got some dirt in your sample? So let's look at the total coliforms and different types of samples and if additional sampling is required. So for a total coliform routine sample, you'll always need additional sampling. If it's a total coliform repeat sample, you'll need additional sampling if an assessment has not been triggered. But if the assessment has been triggered for multiple total coliform in that time period, in that monitoring period, no more sampling will be required. If it's a raw well total coliform sample, no need for additional sampling. If it's a total coliform special sample, you will need additional sampling if it's still liftable water notice, but if it's just for process control, that's up to the system to determine if additional sampling is needed to investigate. For E. coli positives, very similar to the total coliform positive, you will always need additional repeats. For an E. coli repeat sample, if it's a repeat sample that comes back E. coli positive, you've triggered the EMCL, the E. coli maximum contamination level, and no new additional sampling is required. If it's a raw well E. coli, the groundwater rule team will reach out to you with those further steps, and if you haven't heard from them, please reach out to them. And for an E. coli special sample, very similar to the total coliform, if it's to liftable water notice, you will need to collect more samples and mark those as special, but if it's for process control, no additional sampling is needed. So let's look at that E. coli maximum contamination level. An EMCL is an acute health hazard. It may indicate sanitary defect. Those EMCL requirements that TCQ will be reaching out to you about is postable water notice within 24 hours, sendable water notice in the certificate of delivery to TCEQ. To rescind your bowl water notice, you'll need to collect special samples that need to come back negative. We'll be issuing a 1A violation, the EMCL violation, and a level 2 assessment will also be issued. So how to avoid positives? Maintain a good system operation. Keep sufficient disinfection levels. Repair leaks as soon as you notice them or as soon as possible. Be aware of those system conditions, actively searching and looking at your system and trying to find those defects or get ahead of the problems. And follow a regular flushing schedule. Continue to follow your SOPs and SSPs. Avoid unfavorable conditions. Train your staff. Don't collect when it's raining. Don't collect when it's windy. Probably a little more difficult in your West Texas where it's windy all the time or in your East Texas where it's raining. But take your time. Don't rush. There's really no rush to get it done. Just make sure you do it right. Let's talk about those repeat samples. So the repeat sample purpose is to investigate, find that potential contamination, investigate your impacted areas. If you keep getting positives every month in the same area, it's probably an indicator that there is potentially a deeper issue that could be happening. To identify your actual contamination, could it be outside influence? Could it be that your finger fell in the bottle when you were putting the lid on, maybe you dropped the lid in the dirt and didn't blow it out well enough, or you actually blew on the lid. Or improper technique, maybe an opportunity to go back and retrain your staff or to retrain yourself to not get any more positives going forward. So those repeat requirements, as you all might know, within 24 hours of lab notification, you need to collect 3 repeat samples. Always use your sample setting plan when collecting these upstreams and downstreams. So one at the original positive location, 1 upstream within 5 service connections, 1 downstream within 5 service connections. Be sure to mark all those samples as repeat and add the original positive sample ID and date of collection. And if you're unsure on that information, your lab would love to help you fill in that original positive sample information. Our repeat poster was in your bag at this PDW conference. It's also available on our website as well. For groundwater rule trigger source monitoring, PWSs that have wells may require TSM sampling. After routine distribution positive, within 24 hours from lab notification, the system will need to collect a raw well sample from each well that was running at the time of the positive for each positive. For example, this PWS collects 2 routine TC positive samples and has 2 wells, well A and well B. The PWS will collect 2 raw well samples at well A and 2 raw well samples at well B. If you have any wells that were not active during that time period or when the sample or the positive sample was collected, be sure to fill out that TCQ form 20891 and send it to the groundwater rule team. If your system uses 4-log treatment or has a trigger source monitoring plan, you can reach out to groundwater rule data to better further know how to use those. So looking at this MRF for the repeats, we noticed that the first 3 samples are marked as repeat. The sample location has the repeat location designation, such as upstream, original, downstream. This is not necessary, but it can help TCQ understand that these samples were actually collected upstream and downstream if they're not all in the same street. Maybe your upstream location is around the corner because that is the next service location or within those 5 service connections. Also notice your type is marked as repeat. This also includes the original sample location that came back total coliform positive. Finally, your sample ID and date of originating sample is filled out. The last two are raw well samples. First thing you should notice is that these sample locations are marked as your well source ID. This is the letter G, followed by your PWS-ID number, and then your well letter. It is also marked as raw well, and this also has the originating positive information as well because you're linking your wells to that original positive. It's important to note that for the chlorine residual, you need to put a value or your sample will be rejected. So you can put it under either the free or the total. It just needs to have the value 0. Putting a dash or leaving it blank, it will be rejected. So if your system takes fewer than 40 samples per month and they collect one set of repeat samples, after the results, no more repeats are needed. For any TC positive repeats, it would trigger the assessment. A whole set of total coliform negative, your system has no further actions. They can move on with taking their remaining samples for the month, or go back to doing whatever they need to do. For a system collecting 40 or more samples per month, after a repeat total coliform positive, they need to go back and take repeats at the same location, that original total coliform positive sample location, until you get a whole set of total coliform negative samples, or a treatment technique is exceeded, i.e. an assessment is triggered.
Thank you, Justice. So now let's talk about the assessment process. So we do have a group of the revised total coliform rule staff who review and write the corrective action reports for in response to the assessment documentation that you all submit. And I'm one of the 4 that do that, and so I'll go ahead and go over that with you. I wanted to tack on to something that Justice mentioned. He did call your attention to our new repeat guidance poster that's in your bag. We're soliciting feedback on that, see if any of the terminology that we use in that is confusing in any way. We understand our language. We hope that you do too, as far as compliance and what the processes are. But definitely reach out to us at our TA table and our assistance table, or any of our staff, or email us at TCR Data if you have any feedback on any improvements or anything that's unclear on that form for us. Okay, so the goal of the assessment. The assessment is a find and fix exercise for systems to identify the cause of their TC positive samples. We're looking for the pathway of contamination, whether it may be something physical like a line leak, or something that's affecting your treatment processes. We've seen things like chlorinator line break, or depleted stock of your chemicals, and it wasn't caught timely, it was caught through the positive sample. So those are the kinds of things that this process is meant for you to identify, to go out there and to look for. Once the repairs and improvements are made, then the distribution system integrity is restored and public health continues to be protected. The system has 30 days from the date of trigger to submit the response to TCEQ. If the assessment is not submitted to TCEQ by that deadline, then we can move to assigning a violation for not submitting the assessment. Justice spoke on some of the conditions with repeat processes, and he set the foundation for what some of our assessment triggers are. So I just wanted to emphasize that proper collection of repeats is important to prevent triggering an assessment. Some of the conditions to trigger the assessment include not collecting repeats at all, not collecting a complete set of repeats, such as only collecting one repeat sample, and collecting late repeats, 10 days later and stuff, that would trigger an assessment. And so it's important to remember to document the sample types correctly on your microbial reporting form. If only the original location, let's say, is marked as a repeat and the upstream and downstream are routines, that could trigger an assessment, because as Justice said, per the QAPP, there are only certain changes that we could make if you were to make an incorrect sample type marking on that microbial reporting form. So please remember that repeats must be collected within 24 hours of notification from the laboratory. We also reach out and confirm that you know your repeat requirements of that after that TC positive sample. and all the repeats must be collected on the same day. So if for any reason one of your 3 repeats were to be rejected by the lab, then the whole set would have to be recollected again per the rule. Also, per our QAPP, if samples are rejected, all the replacements have to be collected within 24 hours of that rejection notification. So also, we have the triggers based on multiple TC positives if you're a smaller system, and we escalate and we increase to a level 2 assessment if you meet the conditions for assessment for a second time in a rolling 12-month period. And also if there's an E. coli max contaminant level exceedance, you'll get the 1A EMCL violation, but also be required to do an L2A. And I just wanted to add, as far as the EMCL, when it comes to our enforcement process from the Water Supply Division, that particular violation is a 10-point violation, if you're familiar with our ETT system with assigning points to the violations. So for us to return it to compliance and get that 10 points off of your total of your system's record, you need to have a full compliance period after, let's say you had an EMCL in July, all of August, you would have to do your monthly monitoring and not have another trigger. And in order for us to, in September, once we have all of our compliance data for August, return the system to compliance and get that 10-point hit off of your system. So this is just a little graph of our 2023 triggers, just showing on a monthly basis how many we triggered. And so we do see an uptick during the warm and rainy months. So let's talk about the assessment documentation. What is it that we're requesting for you to submit back to us? So this is a side-by-side comparison of the L1A and L2A sections about coliform sample sites. You'll see that there are more questions, and the questions are more in depth for the L2A. The L2A will be conducted with the assistance of an FMT contractor from our contractor firm that's assigned from our financial, managerial, and technical assistance section. So we just ask that you carefully read the questions, since incorrect answers can lead to findings in the corrective action report that we're going to provide you. And so systems must respond to all the applicable sections and questions. We do see sometimes some NA responses where there should be a yes or no response, and so this could be added to your corrective action because we couldn't determine for sure yes or no whether you had done that thing or not that was required of you. So this is an example of how to document if you've identified a sanitary defect. If an event or incident occurred that doesn't meet the criteria of any of the assessment questions, there are fields for additional information also. And just if you've identified it as a sanitary defect, it might not meet our definition of a sanitary defect, and we might note it as an additional corrective action. But we do request the more information, the better. Timelines of the incident and any repairs that you made would be very helpful. If you had to replace chlorine injection lines or something like that, a work order or receipts of contracting someone to do that, as much documentation as you can provide us up front to document that you've already completed your corrective action will help us both in the long run. Okay, so in general, this is what we require for all systems, for all types of assessments. We ask for the completed assessment form, your sample collection standard operating procedure, 2 months of disinfectant residuals that lead up to the positive event, your sample siting plan, and any other relevant information. Like I said, any work orders, any receipts, and things like that. And if you have planned If you have a timeline already for resolving your sanitary defect that you identified, please provide that also, so we know maybe by the time we're getting to the review process, or by the time that documents get to us, maybe you've already completed that, and we'll follow up and see where you are with that. If you have any questions on sample siting plans, please continue to reach out to us, and we can help you with what your requirements are for that. So here are some of the common issues we see with the assessments that we receive. A lot of times we have incomplete submissions where we don't have the disinfectant residual monitoring records, skipped sections. Frequently, for some reason, we see that section 6 on treatment is skipped, and we'll have to reach back out and ask for you to provide your answers for that. Unfamiliarity with the classification of tanks, questions answered for pressure tanks when we look at your facility inventory and see that you only have storage tanks, so then we start to ask questions. Is your inventory not up to date in our database? And then we do reach out if we need additional information, if there are any questions that we need more information on so we can resolve it and determine whether you have a sanitary defect or not, because we're going by the forms that you provide us. We don't have eyes on the ground there, unfortunately, so that's why it's really important for you to be careful with how you fill out the documentation, because we could have findings that just by the mischecking of a box can cause some problems for you. But we do reach out either by email or by phone call, and we just ask that you are responsive to us. Other things that we see, like surface water systems, answering the wrong sections. And another thing that's important to convey to us, if you're doing an L2A and you have a contractor go out and review your facilities, let's say you have different pressure planes, so not all of your facilities for the unaffected area were reviewed, please write that in your response. That way we know that, because again, we can't see that, we don't know that. If it's not in your report or the contractor's report, we don't know why some facilities were left out of your review of your assessment. Okay, so what is our internal process? What does TCEQ do after you provide all your documents to us? So it does go through a cycle that can go a little bit lengthy. One of our 4 reviewers is assigned to do the initial review. They submit it to a colleague, a peer, for their peer review. If we've identified a sanitary defect, then our team leader will review it, and then after that, we send it to the regional office for your specific location, and they have 30 days to review and add any additional concerns or findings. Maybe they've recently done a CCI or a records review for you, and they're aware of something that they feel that we need to know that might not have been documented in the assessment. After it comes back from the region review, then our team leader will review the corrective action plan, or the section manager will if there's a sanitary defect. And then after that, you'll finally get your mail out with the corrective action report and plan. So this, especially when we have these warm months where there's a lot of positives and a lot of assessments triggered, it may take longer for us to get back to you with that corrective action report. So once the reviews are complete, the letter that you actually get back will have recommendations or identification of your sanitary defect. And you'll have, if you have an open sanitary defect, you'll have a due date. A system could have both an open and a closed sanitary defect found in one assessment. The open SD would be the overarching category that we determine your corrective action report is. So we have no sanitary defects identified, closed sanitary defects, and open sanitary defects. Within the corrective action report and plan, we have 3 sections. We have 3 areas that you may have a combination of depending on what we found. You'll have the sanitary defect, which is rule-based, and there'll be either the compliance due date, or if you sent us documentation that it was resolved, we'll have a completed date in there. additional corrective actions, those are rule-based, and the regional office will follow up with that during the next CCI. And best management practices are our recommendations. They're not rule-based, but they're just good practices to get you out of some of the issues we might have identified. So this is an excerpt, screenshot of what the letter would look like if you have an open sanitary defect, where you will see that you have a compliance due date, and we have our return contact information so that you can mail in or email us your support documents showing that you've resolved it. The bold heading is what we've noted as your sanitary defect, and you'll see the circumstances detailed of why we identified the sanitary defect and what rule it is tied to. And then along with that comes the necessary corrective action and the required support documents that we are requesting. So then this is an example of a closed sanitary defect where you can see the completed date. You don't see the section for our return addresses because you've already provided that documentation to us. And we know what corrective action was provided to us, what documents or what actions were taken. All of that is summarized in that section. So here are some of our common sanitary defects or examples of them. So some of them could be physical and allow contamination to enter the system, such as line breaks and leaks. If you do have a leak, be sure to follow AWWA standards and collect a special sample. That is something that we're asking for in when we do reach out to you. We may ask for your special sample results. It's something that's come through us in the region feedback, that some of the regions are looking to make sure that you're collecting a special sample. That could lead to a sanitary defect if you're not doing that after you do repairs and are stating that you're following AWWA standards. Other things are unprotected tank openings, if it's rusted through and it's open to the environment. Sanitary defects can also affect the barriers against contamination, such as failure in disinfection equipment. And other ones include, we have different categories for them, so sanitary defects related to your source water, such as having unapproved sources or contaminated wells. Management and operations, where we're talking about data integrity or falsification of data. Your distribution lines, maintaining your disinfectant residual through the system. And finished water storage, where if tank maintenance is not being conducted or residuals are not being monitored or below the requirement in your finished water storage. And then, of course, treatment, equipment failure, improper procedures. So 35% of all SDs are related to disinfection. Okay, so the second section of our corrective action report and plan is the additional corrective actions. So these are the rule-based ones that, as I said, the regional investigator will follow up on during the next CCI. And the rules are cited in each finding along with the required actions so that you'll be in compliance with the rule. These are some of our examples of additional corrective actions that we note in our corrective action report. Some of them are not conducting tank inspections if you're not doing it in the proper frequency or you're not documenting them. Facility approval, if there's unapproved wells or water haulers. Getting approval for those is important, especially we understand like if you're experiencing drought or we've seen systems where the wells have run dry, but if you need to start hauling water in and you purchase a tank or something, that needs TCEQ approval before you can start operating that. And operating records and reports, not having maintenance records and repair records that document your system actions. So this is a screenshot, just how the letter would look. The third section of your corrective action report and plan, which is the best management practices. These are the recommendations. Some of the examples would still affect your compliance, and they're just things that have been found to be most effective and practical. Your SOP, your sample sites, determining that you're using sanitary sites, that you have a robust and full SOP for sample collection, that your samplers are trained on using it, and recommend following up and updating the TCQ database whenever there are changes to your facilities and staff. So how do we prevent an assessment? We have some recommendations here. Make sure you follow your sample siting plan for active and well-maintained sites. Follow your SOP for sample collection. Evaluate the conditions, weather conditions, and the sample site conditions before you collect. Change locations if needed. Delay if there's weather issues. Communication with the lab and TCEQ so that you know when repeats are needed. And 3 repeats are always required. These are some of the regulatory reference guides that we recommend. Our RG 421 for coliform monitoring. We have a sample siting plan template. There's all kinds of documents on the RTCR web pages, and the quality assurance project plan is found on the Public Water System Supervision Program web page. So those are the 2 main TCEQ web pages that you would find the references that you would need. We recommend that you look at your systems information regularly on Drinking Water Watch to see your sampling, your facilities, your points of contact, and contact our inventory team if any updates are necessary. And if you have any questions about our program, you can contact us at TCR Data. Also, if any of these aspects you would like any assistance with, we recommend that you reach out for free assistance from our financial, managerial, and technical assistance team.
Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you both so much. These 2 are phenomenal at what they do, and they're also phenomenal at customer service and questions. So any questions, raise your hand. We'll come around to you. I see one. Okay.
Now, it was my understanding if we need the FMT assistant, generally it's not tied to enforcement, but one of the slides kind of indicate for the level 2 assessment, that individual or group will come in. Now, is it more tied to enforcement instead of correction?
No, that's not tied to enforcement. If FMT goes out to help with the L2A, and they're more there as assistance and as a guide. The findings, they do provide us reports, but the findings of their reports are not used for any enforcement. They're there to help you and provide guidance.
Okay. I think that's it. Once again, one more round of applause for our presenters.